It's good to see you today. As usual, I appreciate you tuning in for a brief look into God's Word. Today we're going to be thinking about Titus. So come on, let's go to the letter that bears his name, the letter that Paul wrote to Titus. And I would like to start just by reading Titus chapter 1, verse 5. It says, "For this reason I left you in Crete, that you should set in order the things that are lacking and appoint elders in every city as I commanded you." And then he gets into the qualifications for elders. So, what points could we make about Titus? Really, just from this verse, I would suggest. Well, one is he could be left. He was trustworthy. You might think about where Crete is. Crete is an island off in the middle of the Mediterranean, I believe. That's where Crete is, and Titus could be left there. Some people, it goes to trustworthiness. And some people, when the cat's away, the mice will play. Some people cannot work independently. They need someone urging them on. They need someone looking over their shoulder. They need constant attention to make sure that they stay on that straight and narrow path, and that's okay. Um, that's all right. Some people they're just like that. You might think about in the Old Testament, like Barak. Barak, um, the judge, Deborah, says, "Go and attack these people," and Barak says, "I'm not going alone, but I'll go if you go." And Deborah goes with him. Barak is counted among the faithful. Okay, so we recognize that some people they need that, but Titus, he was able to be left. He was able to be left. You might also think about he could be left in a hard place. To look back at the chapter, to look back at the account, the reason I say that it was in a hard place, I left you in Crete that you should set in order the things that are lacking. So, right out of the gate, we see there are things that are lacking there, but also I want you to come down to verse 12. One of them, a prophet of their own, said, "Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons. This testimony is true." So you might think about what Paul just said about the state of Crete. You might think about lying, evil beasts, lazy gluttons. Paul says, yep, this is pretty accurate. This is where Paul left Titus. So it's not just that he left him there. Titus could be left in a hard place. This was a difficult situation. You had Judaizers even in this place that were causing trouble. We see that just a few verses later than where we were reading, where it talks about those of the circumcision who, frankly, their mouths needed to be stopped. This was not a vacation. This was preaching the gospel and trying to set in order the things that were lacking in a place that was increasingly difficult. Lying was prevalent. Wickedness was prevalent. Gluttony was prevalent. That's what was going on. They could be so Titus, he could be left. He could work independently, and he could be left in a hard place. Just think about how trustworthy Titus was from these 2 points. He could be left to do a job as well. That's what Paul says. I left you to set in order the things that are lacking. Titus had a job to do. Paul was not just turning him loose and saying, okay, do whatever you want to do. No, Titus was left with a job. He was left with a job. And he needed to do that job, and he did do that job. But we might think about that idea, and we might just think about that passage, that this is what Titus had. He could work. Titus could work. He could be left. He was trustworthy, and he could be left. And he could be left in a difficult situation. And he could be left to do this job and to set in order the things that were lacking. That's what Titus was being trusted to do. He had a job. Sometimes, and you might think about this passage. You might think about the examination that is required to find out what is lacking in a church, because that does require some examination and some reflection. It requires honesty, but then it also requires actually doing something about it. Recently preached a lesson and someone talked about how that I had called out in the elephant in the room, that there's some issue, and in the sermon I tried to talk about that issue, and this person referred to it as the elephant in the room. Well, that's fine to identify it. Elephants that are in the room need to be identified. But if you don't do anything about it, what good does it do? You have to do the job. That's what you have to do. These things in Crete, there was this issue, and the church was lacking. Okay, it's one thing to identify what's lacking, but then you actually have to do the job. You have to address that problem. Actually do it, not just talk about it, but do it. And that's what Titus was able to do. He could be left in a hard place, and he could be left to do the job. Set these things in order. Set these things in order. You might think about God, who wants things done decently and in order. He could be left to do a job. He could do what he could as well. To look back in our passage and the verse, he could do this that we talked about. Set in order the things that are lacking. Appoint elders in every city. It's going to require some discernment, right? So you have the qualifications for elders. Not everybody's qualified to be an elder. If a man's blameless, the husband of one wife, right? You have the qualifications, okay? Concerning the verse, Cretans are always liars, okay? Rebuke them sharply. Rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith, not giving heed to Jewish fables, okay? All these things. To look at chapter 2, I want you to see. In chapter 2 it says, But as for you, speak the things which are proper for sound doctrine, that the older men be sober. Verse 3, the older women likewise. Then it talks about the young women, what they need to do. And then it talks about the young men, which that's what Titus was. In all things showing yourself to be a pattern of good works. Verse 9, exhort bondservants, such things as that. All these things that are proper for sound doctrine. Okay, you might just read through that list. It's a pretty good list, but the point that we can make is that's what Titus was able to do. He could do what he could. You can't do any more than that. Okay, you can't make people obey. You can't force people. Okay, you can't, it's like the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. The truth of the matter is you really can't even lead a horse to water in this instance. People aren't horses. You can tell them about it. You can preach the word. You can preach these things and teach these things, right, that are proper for sound doctrine, but it's going to be up to those individuals. It's going to be up to those individuals whether or not they actually do what the Lord wants them to do. All you can do is what you can. And that's all the Lord expects of you. And that's all Paul expected from Titus. So he left him there in Crete. He knew it was a hard place to work, but he left him with a job to do, and that's all Titus could do. He could do this job. Just like Timothy, commit the gospel to other faithful men who would be able to teach others also, and preach the truth. While you're there, do what you can. There's going to come a time where Titus is going to leave and there's going to be others there, but while you're there, Titus, do what you can. That's all the Lord asks, and that's all anybody can ask. So, just a little bit about Titus. I hope this study's been beneficial for you as you think about applications for us today, that we ourselves need to be trustworthy, that we should be trustworthy even in difficult situations, and that we fulfill the roles that we have, whatever those roles may be. And we need to do what we can. Hope it's been beneficial for you. Hope you have a good day. Hope you tune in tomorrow for just a little bit more of our daily bread. Thanks for being with us today.